Hello, this is Greg, founder of WrestlingDivas.webs.com. I am here to conduct my second and exclusive interview on the behalf of my website. Joining me today is Kristin, better known as Kristin Flake in the world of professional wrestling. Kristin is a professional wrestler who has competed in the ring for over 3 years now. Kristin has wrestled all over the United States for such companies as WEW. Kristin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's first start off from the beginning. I read somewhere that you were a fan of wrestling while growing up. So, who were some of your most favorite performers?
What really, I think, kind of hooked me, because I wasn't a fan when I was, super young. I started watching when I was about 12. So I think what hooked me was around that time they were doing the, Sting, NWO storyline. And I'd never watched, wrestling before, and so I kind of got sucked in by that. So definitely Sting was probably one of my favorites, and then Shawn Michaels being right up there too. When I first started watching, those would probably be the two that were my most favorite to watch when I was younger.
Did you have a favorite aspect of wrestling while you were watching on TV while growing up? Like a particular match that you enjoyed watching the most? Because wrestling has changed over the years.
That's a hard question to answer me, because I think looking at it, just from a fan perspective, and then, looking at it once you've been in the business a while, you kind of look at things a little bit differently, not totally differently, because, we're all still fans. So I'm not sure that I could say I had a favorite. I know that when I first started watching, probably my favorite parts about it were I was very intrigued with the character development part of it, and the way that not only could you tell a story through video packages and speaking, or, promos, or, that sort of thing, but you could tell your story really in the ring. And I didn't understand really why I was, reading a story from the matches. And, the more you watch and the more you learn, the more you can the more you realize, why things are set up the way they are, so that you can kind of see, oh, I'm really building a story here. But, I don't think I have a favorite match per se. Two matches in particular stick out to me, just as matches that were on TV, not pay-per-view matches, not indie matches, nothing I studied or anything like that. But there was a match with Sting and Ric Flair on the last Nitro, and I've gone round and round with a couple people on that, because some people said, I think Ric Flair wore a t-shirt on that match, and they thought that it was just kind of not a great match, but I thought that it told a great story of all the rivalries that they had in the past, and then being their last match in WCW. I just thought that it kind of was the right way to put that company out, and so I really enjoyed that match. And then also, I believe it was December of 2003, and I could be wrong on my dates because I'm not great with dates. There was a Triple H HBK match that was on Raw, and it was just absolutely fantastic. I remember sitting with a friend of mine who is not a wrestling fan, and she was over, and she was, watching with me to amuse me, I guess. And I remember her watching that match, and just afterwards sitting there, and she said, "Now I kind of understand why you like this." And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. She didn't have to know any of the background in it. You just saw that match, and you didn't have to know anything else. You didn't have to know what happened before or what happened after. That one match kind of summed everything up, because they're such great performers. And so I would say those are probably the two matches, growing up, that I saw. And I mean, obviously I've gone back and watched, more indie stuff, and Japan and Mexico and, you know, all sorts of other stuff since then. But those are the two matches, like, just growing up that really stick out in my head.
Was there any particular event in your life that made you say, I want to become a professional wrestler?
I don't think there's any particular event. I think that everyone who's in wrestling, I think, has to have some sort of weird, quirky personality, in some way. I mean, it's a lot to do to your body. The business is very cutthroat, but you also get a lot out of it. I grew up being very shy, so I always thought going to be a stretch for me to get out and play a character in front of a bunch of people, but it really hasn't been that difficult for me. A lot of people, you know, who knew me growing up are like, you know, you're so quiet, or they, you know, even if people who meet me today, if it's not at a show or something, if it's an everyday life, they're like, you're so quiet. And I'm like, because I'm not a loud person, but when you put me in front of an audience, you know, I just know that I have, you know, something to, you know, job to do, and, you know, it's a different sort of thing. So I think that there wasn't one instance. I remember, and I hate saying this because no disrespect to Sable, but I mean, she's definitely not like the woman's wrestler that everybody should look up to, I don't think. But when I started watching, she was like one of the only females who was actually doing any kind of in-ring competition. Obviously, they started bringing in Jackie, and then Tori, not Tori Wilson, but the DX Tori, and Luna, and a couple of other girls who could actually, you know, work with her. But when I first started watching, she was one of the only girls in the ring, and I remember just watching her, and she was so physically fit, and I was just getting into fitness, and watching her, and she was just very strong, or seemed very strong, and, you know, she was, you know, obviously very beautiful, and, you know, she was going out there, and she was still mixing it up with everybody, and so I think that watching her is kind of what piqued my interest and showed me that, you know, women could be part of the sport. Of course, you know, you go on and then you look at all the women before her who were absolute wrestling greats, and the women after her. So I don't want to necessarily chalk it all up to her, but she was what was on my TV and in my house, you know, every Monday night that I could see to kind of spark that little bit of interest.
Was the training process to become a wrestler as difficult as you originally thought it would be?
I always thought it was going to be hard. I'm not the most coordinated person in the world. I'm not a risk taker. I am not fearless. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like to flip around. So I knew that it was going to be just being able to trust myself and trust the people that I was in there with, and that if it was something I really wanted, it was something I just had to do. I was never afraid of the pain part of it, just because I have a high pain threshold, and so that was never something that I was, you know, scared of, or that was going to hold me back. But as far as learning how to flip and learning how to kind of, you know, let fear go, because as soon as you get scared in there, that's when you're going to get hurt the most. And so kind of letting go of the control, because I like to be in control all the time, so letting go of the control was probably the hardest thing. But I remember I actually trained with Dory Funk Jr. In Ocala, Florida, when I was 16, I believe, 16 or 17. And I remember the first time I went to take a back bump, he had us doing them on, like, crash pads. And there were guys in the class, and he'd, you know, come go over and take their bump, and they'd go do it. And when I got up to take my bump, he held my hand. And I was like, you know, no disrespect, please no disrespect, but I I don't need you to hold my hand. I have to do this on my own. So it was really a lot of the toughness in the training was a lot of the guys wanted to handle me more delicately than I wanted to be handled. I wanted to train like one of the guys because I felt like if I didn't, then, you know, I wouldn't be able to be the best I could be.
So what is one thing about the wrestling industry that a fan just will never understand?
Oh, goodness. There's probably a lot of things. There's probably a lot of things that fans will understand, and there's probably a lot of things that people who are in the business will never understand. I mean, honestly, what kind of crazy people go out on the road, whether it's, you know, 365 days a year, however long you're on the road with one of the big companies, or whether it's 2 or 3 times every weekend if you're working indies, and, you know, basically put your body through a car crash. What kind of crazy people do that? I don't have an answer for it, and I do it. So, I mean, I don't understand that part of it. I think from a fan's perspective, I think a lot of times fans don't really appreciate the amount of work that goes into it, whether it's the person getting to the show and, you know, putting everything aside for them, you know, and I think that they don't sometimes understand that there's a difference between the people and what we might do while we're on the show. Unless you're in it, you can't really ever see the full picture of it, either as far as, you know, backstage stuff and all the things that people do to each other. So it's a very complex business.
For many female competitors in this industry, it is their number one goal to, quote, make an impact in a male-dominated business. So in your personal opinion, what does it take to do just that?
You know, and I might get a little bit of flack for this, but I don't think that girls can really be measured at the same, on the same scale as guys, and that's not to say that a female wrestler cannot be, quote, as good, unquote, as a male wrestler. It's just that females have to have a bit of a different style. You know, you can still have, you know, the same basic match, and you can still have a hard-hitting match and all that, but you're still a girl, and there's still, the audience, when they're watching a female wrestling match, they want to see something a little different than guys, and we can bring something slightly different to the table than the guys do. So I don't think that there's necessarily a comparison there. I think in order to make an impact, you have to do the same thing that any male would have to do, and that is to have some sort of distinct personality. I think that you have to be able to connect with the fans, and sometimes that's an intangible kind of thing. Some people do and some people don't. I think that you have to sometimes just, you know, have the right kind of it factor at the right time. I mean, some people just get lucky with that. So I think it's all the same components that would separate a male competitor. I think that they're just, you know, looked at slightly differently in females.